All right, hello once again. This is Jeff Scott of Rankin Technical College, and I've been going over the PowerPoint presentations for Murox ASP.NET 4.6 with C# 2015 6th edition. And I'm into Chapter 17 of our text, which is on how to use object data sources with AWD1111. And we're up to the product list application, and I don't remember if I've loaded that yet or not. I have not. So let's go in there and do that. All right, so here it is. Again, this is shown in your textbook on page 607. Here it is in design mode. Doesn't look like, much more than what we've already looked at. And we'll run it. Because the application is identical in appearance to the product list application we did in Chapter 13. But rather than using an SQL data source to retrieve the data, it now uses an object data source. All right. So you've seen this before. We can change, and what's down below will change with it. All right. So there are two methods of the product DB class. They are get all categories, which does not require any parameters. It returns an enumerable object. And enumeration, for lack of better words, is kind of a user-defined data type. All right, so it returns an I is for interface, enumerable object with the ID and long name of all categories in the categories table. And we've got to get products by category, which requires you to pass in a category ID. It also returns an enumerable object, but this has the ID, the name, the unit price, and the on hand, and it's returning that information from the products table. So the category drop-down list is bound to an object data source, and that retrieves the list of categories. The data list control is bound to the second object data source, and that uses the parameterized query to retrieve all of the associated products. Okay? Both of them use a data access class named product DB. And the product DB contains these two methods that we saw right here. So what's shown here and on page 609 in the book is the default ASPX code. If you look at this listing and compare it to what is shown in figure 1317, which is on pages 474, 475, 476, and 477 in your book, you'll note that the only difference is that the SQL data source elements have been replaced by object data source elements. In other words, the code for the drop-down list and for the data list controls is identical whether we use an SQL data source or whether we use an object data source. Where the power in this starts to come into play is shown here on pages 610 and 611. This presents the C# code for the product DB class. Now, remember, classes typically are going to be put into your, what folder is that? I want to check and tell you to make sure I'm giving you the right one. All right, so we stop the run. App data is normally going to hold your database. All right. And what you can do is you can right mouse click on here and choose add. And there are also ASP.NET folders. All right, app code is the one that's oftentimes used to hold your different classes. Now, don't know if they're doing that here. I don't see it here, but they've got models. And I guess that's what they're using, okay? All right, so they're using the models folder. So we can right-click on that models folder and choose add class. That's what they did to add the product DB class. So they right mouse click, choose add, and then either, I guess I can use class here, or I can do a new item and I can go and find class in here. And it is in here. I might have to search for it, but I know that it's in here. Of course, when I want to find something, I'm never able to do so, but I know it's in here. Okay? All right, I don't want to add anything, so I'm going to cancel. But let's look at the product DBCS. Again, this is just raw C# code. In other words, there's no GUI associated with it. So the class includes data object and data object model attributes. These attributes are used to identify the class and the methods as data objects. We'll talk about those a little bit more in an upcoming part of this, probably the next video. For now, realize that they're used by the configured data source wizard to determine which classes and which methods to display when you configure the object data source. All right? The get all categories that's in here, it starts by creating the connection to the Halloween database. So that's done right here. To get the connection, it calls the getConnectionString method. Then it creates a string variable that holds all the information that we're going to want to use in our select statement. And that's right here. Then we come in and we create the SQL command object using that string variable along with our connection object. Finally, the connection is opened, all right, and we do our execute reader, not an execute non-query, but an execute reader because, again, we're using a select statement. That creates the data reader object that contains the requested data, and the data reader is returned to the object data source. Okay? We also pass to that the close connection method, so when it's done, it'll close the connection for us. All right? Now, what I just did was I went over the get products by category, and in the book they first talk about this one. The ideas are the same. You create the connection, you create a string that's going to hold your select, you create a command object, you open the connection, you execute the command object basically, you close the thing, and you return your results. You're doing the same thing in both of these situations. Again, although this is a very short lecture, I'm going to stop right here because in the next series of lectures, I'm going to go over just about 6 pages, how to create data access class, how to design a class, how to create a select method, how to create update, delete, and insert methods, and how to use attributes to mark the class. We'll do that in the third video, then we'll go through this category maintenance application. And we'll look at that in some depth and breadth of coverage. Following that, we'll go into how to use paging and sorting. And that'll pretty much wrap up the chapter. So I'm in the second or third, I think the third video, and I'll have 3 more to go after this. But I like breaking it up like this. To me, this is a natural place to break something like this up. So I'll be back with the next lecture shortly.